I'll be totally honest. Good morning, everybody. I have serious imposter syndrome. I looked at the lineup of speakers today and I was like, they've actually got amazing speakers. And then they asked an ex-beauty queen to come and stand up on stage. So CapeTalk, you guys obviously have to up your budget next year when you're looking at speakers, because me, seriously? But then I realized there's a wonderful quote by Dr. Luann Brizendine, who's an associate professor at Harvard, I think, and she wrote in her book entitled The Female Brain, she said, the reason why women are just brilliant at communication is because every fetus starts out as female. And the fetus only becomes male 6 weeks after conception, when excess testosterone shrinks the communication center, reduces the hearing cortex, and makes the part of the brain that processes sex twice as large. So hence, as women, we're just genetically wired to be better communicators. But I'm super excited to be here this morning and to be your next speaker. But I do want to acknowledge the previous speakers. I really enjoyed listening to, well, Nicola, I'm going to say this. I'd love to have, not a glass, but a bottle of wine with you. And yes, we'd actually be doing very good for the Western Cape because we have water restrictions. So I encourage you, don't drink the water, drink the wine. Do it for your province. But the other thing I also wanted to say is that my ego, I don't drive an X5, I drive an X4, but my ego is growing bit by bit. So if your ego, or if my ego does take me over the 20 minutes that's been allocated to me, do just give me the sign and I'll get off. Okay, fantastic. But I want to take you back now 100 years ago, when the first ever International Women's Day was observed. Now this was 28 February 1909 in New York. It was organized by the Socialist Party then of America. It was a peaceful demonstration to bring attention to the then feeble rights of women. We then go in that same week at his lawyer's office. Hiram Percy Maxim, son of machine gun inventor Hiram Maxim, demonstrated to reporters his new invention, the Maxim silencer, a firearms sound suppressor. And he said to the press very proudly, I shall make war noiseless. A few years later, March 8th, 1917, in the capital of then Russian Empire, Petrograd, women textile workers began a peaceful demonstration, which then went on to mark the start of the Russian Revolution. In that same week, the German Foreign Secretary, Arthur Zimmermann, publicly announced that the Zimmermann telegram is genuine, and this generated support for the US's declaration of war on Germany in April. Not as peaceful. Fast forward a few years later and picture the surroundings on 9 August 1956, when 20,000 South African women of all races peacefully marched on the Union buildings in protest against the proposed amendments to the Urban Area Act of 1950. In the same week, the USSR, then, under the leadership of Mr. Nikita Khrushchev, performs a nuclear test, an atmospheric test, not quite so peaceful. Now, the conclusion is that women have always been trailblazers and history makers, but more quietly, more with humility, and infinitely less violently so, changing the world for the better, not for their sake of their egos, but usually for the sake of their children, their families, their loved ones. We lead differently, and that's a proven fact. Now, my speech today is not about villainizing men, definitely not. I think that for South Africa and for the world to succeed, we all have to work together and, of course, use our different traits to make sure that we continue to grow. But my speech is about elevating women and trying to encourage women to do what they know they can, but sometimes feel a little bit scared to actually do. My husband did tell me when I was practicing to picture him in the audience and make sure that I had to imagine what it would be like to share the car driving home with him if I bashed too much with the men bashing. So I'm going to try and be as objective as possible. Now, up to probably just the last few decades, the role of the woman has been primarily defined as mother. And I think while it's one of the most fulfilling roles in the world, I don't think it's the only role for women. Motherhood is a wonderful blessing, an incredible privilege. I was joking and chatting to some of my friends because I'll be honest, in our 20s, we struggled not to get pregnant, and sometimes in our 30s, we struggle to get pregnant. It's interesting how life has these different cycles. But motherhood is something I will never take for granted, but that's another talk and another 20 minutes that needs to be dedicated to that. But just to contextualize, how many of you in the room today are mothers? Please raise your hands. Okay, great, great. In 1900, 5% of married women had jobs. In 1980, that number jumped to 51%. Fast forward now to 2017, a time when being a working mom is the norm rather than the exception. Now this, of course, we know is not necessarily always by choice. Sometimes it's because of economic and social limitations. The employment rate in our beautiful country was published at 27.7% in June this year. 27.7% unemployment rate in South Africa. This is the highest rate in 13 years, and this is quite staggering actually. Women make up about 50% of the labor force in South Africa. 60% of households in South Africa are headed up by single mothers. In terms of business leadership, among South Africa's top 40 companies listed on the JSE, there's just one led by a female CEO, and this was according to a study from 2016. That all being said, though, the CEO of the JSE is female, Nikki Newton-King. So hopefully, corporate South Africa is waking up more and more to the fact that female voices are needed in the boardroom. Now, I'm proud to sit on the boards of 5 diverse companies, and thank you very much, Priya. You spoke about Jessica Elba and how she said she's bringing a different perspective. But women shouldn't try to beat men at being hard in the boardroom. I think it's sometimes the differentiating factor, the fact that we are nurturers by nature, that we bring a different perspective into the boardroom. And I actually am proud to sit on the board of a company with our female CEO, a female chairperson, and the chairperson actually used to be my economics lecturer at Stellenbosch University. And I'm so, so proud to constantly be learning from incredible women. They say a candle loses none of its light by lighting another candle. And I've been so lucky to have other women along my journey who try to teach and who try to show the way. And that's made me so cognizant of the fact that as a woman succeeding, or perceived to be successful, you have to constantly light the candles of others around you. It is actually your responsibility. Now, I'm passionate about entrepreneurship and the growth of SMMEs in South Africa, small, micro, medium enterprises, in particular those headed up by single mothers. We need to create a culture of entrepreneurship in South Africa, especially amongst those women who are raising the children of our nation. I had a chat earlier on to a lovely lady who's sitting over there who was telling me about her son, Caleb, yes, who is 20 years old. And when we think about it, the best way to actually teach our children is to show them, not to tell them, but to actually be the examples that they're looking for. Now, according to Stats SA, and Priya, thank you, you alluded to this as well, in 2014, there were 1.1 million births, and 64% of those births registered had no information on the fathers. Nearly 2/3 of South African children grow up in homes without fathers. We desperately need to teach fathers in South Africa how to be fathers. But that's another 20-minute talk down the line. Our country has one of the highest global rates of single motherhood. 40% of South African mothers are single parents, and in the developed world, that rate is 15%. So these are stats which tell you, as women, we really need to support other women. I know it's a lot of statistics to digest so early in the morning, but the numbers speak volumes. And I know that generally people value what they can measure, as they did with report cards and so on. Sometimes we have to throw those statistics away and actually just speak to the people around us and find out what can we do to improve the situation. Now, entrepreneurship to me is the only way to address the extreme situation we find ourselves in as South Africans and as mothers. We cannot wait on government to create jobs. We have to create the change which we want to see in the world. And the only way to do that is to create a new or parallel economy where we measure success not by the size of one's salary or one's star status, but the amount of meaningful jobs one is able to create. We need to push for the stumbling blocks for growth to be removed from SMMEs, the excessive red tape, the bureaucracy, which of course we know so well in our beautiful country, the rigid labor regulations, the inability to access finance, skills development, business support, access to markets, procurement. There's a critical need for increased levels of entrepreneurship and small business in South Africa, particularly from women. I might be preaching to the converted here. How many of you in this room have your own businesses? Please raise your hands. Please help me to go out there and spread the message. You know that they say there are 3 forms of effective communication: telephone, television, telewoman. So help others to start their own businesses, because that is the only way we can prevent South Africa from going over the tipping point. So South Africa needs jobs to be created. Women, businesses. This is research has shown women-owned businesses tend to be more profitable than those run by men. And this has led to a call for women to be supported and encouraged to start their own businesses. Government research has revealed that 45% of women own and actively manage a business. However, that figure is skewed toward the informal sector, where 52% of business owners were found to be female-owned, compared to 31% in the formal sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, according to the survey, 78% of women-owned businesses are profitable, compared to 70% for men. What does that tell us? As women, we understand how money works. So let's continue doing that. And this is going to be a very sexist joke, but I thought I'd throw this in just for equal measure because I've been a little bit man-bashing. So Koos is walking on the beach and he's thinking, I've got everything my heart could possibly desire. I've got the wonderful, wonderful house properties all over the world. I've got cars, X5s, X4s, X3s, everything. I've got an amazing, amazing wardrobe. I've got everything, everything, everything. But I'm looking for one thing in my life, a woman. Koos has never really been great with the ladies, so he's looking for someone. And all of a sudden, as he's walking on this long deserted beach, he sees an Aladdin-like lamp, which he proceeds to rub vigorously, and a genie pops out and says, Koos, I'll grant you one wish, Afrikaans fairy, but one wish only. Koos thinks about this. And he thinks, I want to be irresistible to every single woman on the planet. I want no woman to be able to walk past me without an insatiable feeling of thirst, desire, hunger, passion. I want women to want me like they want Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. And with a crash, boom, bang, all of a sudden, Koos turns into a platinum Visa credit card. Anyway, very sexist joke, but I had to throw that in. We really do know how to work with money, and we need to give ourselves credit because, yes, for generations, women have been raising kids with very little help, especially the single moms with very little help, and they've done phenomenal, phenomenal jobs. Now, yes, South Africa can do and should do more to develop its full SMME potential. The lack of information or access to information has been frequently identified as one of the inhibitors of entrepreneurial activity in South Africa. But that's where I also need you. And again, perhaps I am preaching to the converted, but let's go out there and encourage people to start their own businesses. Not just women, our daughters, our sons. Let's go out there and teach them that, yes, of course, have a job. I think it's brilliant. You need to get job experience, but you need to have something on the side as well, whether it's a small business, whether it's something that makes 200, 300 rand a month, but you need to start your own business so that you understand. And sometimes, yes, you're going to fail, but that's the best teacher at times as well. I sit on the advisory board of a graduate school of business and have often questioned why MBAs or degrees are rated internationally on the size of the salary that graduates earn after, instead of the employment numbers graduates have been able to create. But we can't only rely on government to push the envelope when it comes to job creation. There's a wonderful saying, and I think it became even more topical after the last couple of days' developments in South Africa. Do you know that there's a great similarity between politicians and baby nappies? They say politicians and babies' nappies, they should both be changed regularly and for the same reason. Hulle is vol kak. But sorry, I'm just quoting Nicola there. South Africa, we have a serious nappy rash. A dirty nappy stench that nauseates even the most tolerating nurse. And yes, of course, we cannot be silent, but we also have to work on creating the opportunities and not waiting on our leadership to do that. I think we need to break the stigma of hoping for handouts in South Africa. We need to create a culture of startups, of entrepreneurship, and we need to do that ourselves. I think that SMMEs are the most powerful contributor to sustainable economic growth. In South Africa, the sector contributed between 1998 and 2005, 90% of jobs created in South Africa. Now, culturally, entrepreneurship is also a difficult one. How many of you grew up in a household where close family members had businesses? Please raise your hands. Okay, good. I can tell you this, my dad always said to me, he wants me to get a nice stable job where I have job security. He watched me enter Miss South Africa and become a beauty queen and then travel the world with Pasella and top billing and always said, "Maar my dogtertjie, wanneer gaan jy nou vir jou 'n regte job kry?" And I understand that because as a parent, and as a parent now, I understand that you want your child to have job security and you want your child to be okay. But I think sometimes it's actually good to be uncomfortable because then you do things that you never thought you'd actually be able to achieve. I started reading lots of books. How many of you have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki? I love this audience. Okay, great. How many of you have read Architects of Poverty? Also an interesting book. Different way of looking at economics in South Africa or in Africa. How many of you have read Capitalist Nigger? Okay, great. Interesting. But we've also got to understand that culturally, if you didn't grow up in a household where people have their own businesses, sometimes it's difficult to imagine what it's like to start a business, and you don't know perhaps who to ask for advice. And in my home, in my family, discussing money was almost considered impolite. You didn't talk about money. You didn't talk about how much you make. You didn't talk about balance sheets and what does the cash flow situation look like. And it's so important that we teach children as well to understand the value of money, not to judge others by how much money they have, but to understand how to actually make money and how to make money work for you as opposed to the other way around. I realized early on in my career that it is essential to surround myself with people cleverer than me. Especially in my business, I believe it's essential to have people cleverer than me. Christina, my intern, you're wondering why you're sitting here? Because you're cleverer than me. And as an ex-beauty queen, it's not the hardest thing to do, you know, surround yourself with people cleverer than you, but I think it's such an important thing to constantly learn from other people and to be open to sharing information. When women get together and we discuss things, and some people call it skinnering, some people call it social analytics, I always think it's wonderful, the quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said that average or small minds discuss other people, average minds discuss events, and big minds discuss ideas. And I always say to my girlfriends, yes, of course, we do need some time to get together and to skin it and to get that oxytocin flowing, because yes, a good skinner session is good. I do sometimes sit and trawl through people's Instagram feeds and then go, did you really wear that? Oh my gosh. And you need that sometimes, but then move on to the ideas, move on to discussing how can we make each other some money, how can we do some business together. My dad, as I said, was adamant that I finish my BCom degree. I went and I traveled the world with top billing, and I was so lucky. In Xhosa City, ukuhamba kukubona, ndiyavuya gqithi. I'm so lucky. Ndingathetha isiXhosa besifundo sam esikolo ngamanye amaxesha ndiyazama ukuthetha isiXhosa kodwa kunzima gqithi ukuthetha onke amaxesha, okay? So, you guys love it when I talk foreign to you. It's been such an eye-opener for me. I'm a cultural chameleon. My family always laugh because when I get really excited, my accent falls, right? My parents paid dearly for my accent, and I knew that if I wanted to do top billing, which I always thought was going to be my way to sort of get into the media world, I couldn't go, oh, hey guys, welcome to top billing, now, yeah, Raglika, oh, hey. So tonight we're going to show you like this, and there's nothing wrong at all with the accent. In fact, my husband says that to him it's the most beautiful accent, and it is. But I knew sometimes you have to be a social chameleon in order to move forward. You know who you are. As with makeup, as with accents, as with clothing, you dress the part, you talk the part, you prepare. You always prepare. And so yes, I'm very happy that I presented Toppling because it made a big difference. I'll tell you a story as well. As a child growing up in Blackheath, how many of you guys know where Blackheath is? Okay, great. So in Blackheath, on the corner of Fern Road, which is where I grew up, there, our Bubby, Mr. Sunday, who was probably the first entrepreneur I ever knew, Bubby. Yeah. So Bubby's shop was there, and there was a public phone. And for fun, when people ask me, what broadcasting experience do you have? I always think of, as a 14-year-old, we would collect the change from the Coke bottles that you were taking for the deposit. Remember in those days? And then you'd get some cents. And we'd go and we'd make prank phone calls. And I would practice my perfect Transvaal Afrikaans. Hi, dit is Sorry van die Kruger Nasionale Wildpark. En ek het gehoor daar's 'n mevrou Olifant daar. Ons het net 'n meneer Olifant. Kan ons jou help dalk? I would go and practice my accents and practice being the social chameleon, but that has been one of the things that has helped me so much in my career thus far. But anyway, I'm going into a totally different direction. How long have I been speaking? I started at 9:02. Where are we now? Cut. Okay. So I'm going to now do my thank yous. I want to applaud organizations like Old Mutual, the Masisizane Fund, Zizi Ponyanga, CEO since October 2016. They created a fund, 1 billion rand in unclaimed shares, and they are investing this in people's startups. People say it's expensive to invest in startups, and that's absolute nonsense. It's expensive not to invest in startups. I enjoyed the interview I listened to with Tracy Chambers of the Clothing Bank. I think it's so important. I actually tweeted a link to that interview that was on CapeTalk. Go and check that out. Thank you, CapeTalk, for preaching the gospel of entrepreneurship. We need that. I started a blog called Modern Mommy, and initially it was just a platform for me to sort of vent about breastfeeding and about this and about that, and sort of share my little bump and all these sort of, it's a little bit narcissistic, because sometimes I feel that social media is actually so antisocial. There's a whole new degree of depression coming off social media because everybody's life looks so much better than yours, because everything is with a filter, hashtag just saying. But I created this blog initially because I wanted to be the Carrie Bradshaw. Remember Sex and the City? I wanted to be the Carrie Bradshaw of motherhood. But then I realized that being a public figure, not using your voice to do more to help those who perhaps just need a little bit of a push in the direction is silly. I met so many incredible people like Anelia Annandale, who's sitting here from Kido, when I was a presenter on Pasella, and I had a chance to start a range of zippy grows with her, and we managed to feed 8,000 people. Kido says, yeah, well, Nelia says we way over that, but basically I learned from Nelia how to do the clothing and the design process and how to take something to market, etc. People who have been so selfless with their time to help and develop other entrepreneurs. Breastfeeding, I now work as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. I've been so passionate about being a boob crusader, and I've had so much feedback as well from other mothers on Modern Mommy saying, can you please promote my product, can you please do, just give me a little bit of exposure. And I realized that Modern Mommy eventually is not going to be just a blog. It's not going to be a place for me just to accumulate likes on how I've managed to coordinate my outfits with my kids. To me, I want Modern Mommy to become a venture capital fund to help other women to start their businesses, especially single moms in South Africa, because to me, that's the essential thing. We need to not just invest our money, we need to invest our time in growing new entrepreneurs. I always say that time is more valuable than money. You can always get more money, but you can never get more time, and that's why you need to be sure about how you invest your time. So, speaking of time, I think my time is up. But lessons learned again. Be careful who you spend your most important and precious commodity on, time. And then, this quote, I'm going to say it again, And just so that the guys know I'm ending off on a tribute to you, this quote was by a man, James Keller: "A candle loses none of its own light by lighting another candle." Go on and light some more candles this August. Thank you very much.